The papers were already on the table. The pen was already in the auctioneer's hand. In a fluorescent-lit room in the basement of the Cutler County Courthouse on a cold Thursday morning in November, a 74-year-old woman named Della Hayes was about to lose the only home she had ever owned. The house where, for 41 years, she had raised other people's abandoned children as if they were her own. The auction was a formality now. The men who buy houses like hers for pennies were in their folding chairs, coffees in hand, waiting to bid. The woman from the lending company was checking her watch, and a man in the back row, a stranger, nobody anyone recognized, a working man in a canvas coat who had come that morning to make money, not to make history, sat watching it happen and felt something he had spent his whole life trying not to feel rise up in his chest and refused to sit back down. He stood up. He didn't have a lawyer. He didn't have a checkbook that could stop anything. He was not a rich man or a powerful one or anyone at all. He was just a stranger in the back row who could not watch one more second of it. And what he said in the next 4 minutes did not just save Della Hayes' house. It reminded an entire room full of people of something they had all forgotten they knew. There is a house at 214 Poplar Street in Cutler, a plain 2-story with a wide porch and a swing, and more human beings owe their lives to that house than to any hospital in the county. This is the story of the morning the whole town almost let it go, and the one stranger who wouldn't. To understand what was nearly lost that morning, you have to understand Della Hayes and the house, and what the two of them had done together for 41 years. Della and her husband Otis bought the house on Poplar Street in 1979, a young couple who wanted a big family and then learned, the hard way, over years, that they could not have children of their own. Most people, handed that grief, would have shrunk their lives down to fit it. Della and Otis did the opposite. They looked at that empty 4-bedroom house and they decided to fill it with the children nobody else wanted. They became foster parents in the spring of 1983. And they did not stop. For 41 years, the house at 214 Poplar was where the county sent the children it had run out of places for. The hard cases, the ones who'd been in 6 homes already. The angry ones, the silent ones, the ones who flinched when you moved too fast. The babies who came in the middle of the night with a social worker and a garbage bag of clothes. Della took them all. Over 4 decades, more than 140 children passed through that house, some for a weekend, some for 18 years. She fed them and she sat up with their nightmares, and she went to their parent-teacher conferences and their graduations, and when they finally aged out or moved on, she kept every single one of their phone numbers and called them on their birthdays for the rest of her life. She did not do it for money. The stipend the county paid never once covered what those kids needed, and Della made up the difference for 41 years out of Otis's paycheck from the plant, and when Otis retired, out of nothing at all. She did it because she had decided, a long time ago, that no child was going to pass through Cutler County unloved as long as she had a bed and a pulse. Otis died 6 years ago. And that is where the trouble started, the way trouble so often starts, with grief and a widow, and men who watch for exactly that. After Otis died, the medical bills came. His last illness had been long, and Della, who had never in her life carried debt, found herself for the first time behind. And a company called Cardinal Home Lending, which specialized in exactly this, sent her a friendly letter. They could help. A refinance, lower payments, cash to cover the bills, and all she had to do was sign. Della, 70 years old and grieving and frightened, signed. She did not understand, because it was designed so she would not understand, that the loan was built to fail. The low payments were temporary. The fees were enormous. The rate reset after 2 years to something that would swallow her whole. It was not a lifeline. It was a hook, dressed up as a lifeline, and it had been aimed at her on purpose. By the fall of this year, Della Hayes owed $23,400 she could not pay, on a house worth $200,000 that she had very nearly paid off before Cardinal got their hooks in it. And Cardinal Home Lending was foreclosing, which had been the plan all along, because the house was worth 10 times the debt. And a man named Dean Pruitt intended to take the whole thing for the price of the shortfall, and resell it, and pocket the difference. Della told no one. That is the detail that breaks my heart the most. 140 children who would have crawled across broken glass for her, and she told not one of them, because Della Hayes had spent 41 years being the one who helps, and she did not know how to be the one who needs it. She was too proud and too ashamed, and so she went to that auction alone, in her Sunday coat, to watch strangers sell her home. And she had not called a single one of her kids. The man who came to take her house was named Dean Pruitt, and there is not a great deal of complexity to offer you about him, because there was not a great deal of complexity in him. Some stories give you a villain with a wound, a reason, a buried decency. This is not one of those. Dean Pruitt was simply a man who had discovered, early, that you could get rich by finding grieving elderly people and offering them a rope that was actually a noose, and who had made his peace with it by deciding it was just the market. He was 51. He wore a good suit. He had done this to 19 families in 3 counties, and he had a spreadsheet, and on the spreadsheet Della Hayes was a line with a good margin. He did not think of her as a woman. He had trained himself carefully over years not to think of any of them as anything. That was the whole trick of his business, and he was very good at it. He did not come to the auction himself usually, but 214 Poplar was a fat one, low debt and high value, and Dean Pruitt liked to be in the room for the fat ones. So he sat in the second row, checking his phone, waiting for the county to hand him 140 children's home for $23,000. The auctioneer was a county man named Earl Dabney, 63, who had been running foreclosure sales for the courthouse for 22 years. Earl was not a bad man either. Earl was something more common and, in its way, more dangerous. He was a numb one. He had auctioned off so many homes, read so many legal descriptions of so many people's whole lives reduced to a parcel number, that he had stopped hearing them years ago. It was a job. He did it Thursdays. He had learned not to look at the faces in the folding chairs, because the faces were how you got yourself into trouble, and Earl Dabney had a pension coming in 3 years, and no intention of feeling anything that might jeopardize it. He shuffled the papers. He cleared his throat. He began to read the legal description of Della Hayes's life. And in the back row, a stranger in a canvas coat began, very slowly, to understand where he was. His name was Wes Turner, and he had come to the Cutler County Courthouse that morning to make money. Wes was 44, a contractor from 2 towns over, a small-time house flipper who kept his crew fed by buying wrecks at foreclosure auctions, fixing them up and selling them on. He was good at it. He was, that morning, one of the vultures, one of the men in the folding chairs with a coffee and a number in his head, there to buy some old woman's house for as little as the room would let him. He had done it dozens of times. He had gotten good at not thinking about it. The same way Earl Dabney had. You had to, in that business. The house was a house. The math was the math. But Wes Turner had a thing about him that he mostly kept in a locked room in the back of himself, and the thing was this. Wes Turner had been a foster kid. 9 placements, between the ages of 4 and 17. 9 houses, 9 sets of rules, 9 families that were not his, some indifferent and 2 genuinely cruel, and not one. Not one, in 13 years, and 9 houses, that had ever felt like home. Wes had aged out of the system at 18 with a garbage bag of his own and a certainty, bone deep, that there was no such thing as a house where a kid like him got to belong. He had built a whole hard, functional life on top of that certainty. It was why he was good at buying people's houses out from under them. Houses were just houses. He of all people knew that. Nobody really belonged anywhere. And then, Earl Dabney, in his Flat County drone, read the part of the legal description that mentioned the property had been operated as a licensed foster home continuously since 1983, and something in the back row of Wes Turner's chest went very still. 41 years. A foster home. Since 1983, Wes looked, for the first time, at the old woman in the Sunday coat, sitting alone in the front row, with her hands folded in her lap and her chin up and her eyes shining and refusing to spill. And he understood, all at once, exactly what he was looking at. He was looking at the house he had needed his entire childhood and never once had. He was looking at 41 years of the exact thing that had been withheld from him, about to be sold for pennies to men exactly like the man he had become. And the woman who had given it, hundreds of times over, to hundreds of kids like him, was going to lose it. Alone, in a fluorescent basement, while a room full of people who knew better sat in folding chairs and let it happen. "Do I have an opening bid?" Earl Dabney said, not looking up, "at $23,400. Dean Pruitt raised his hand without looking up from his phone. And Wes Turner stood up. "Don't." That was the first word. It came out of him before he'd decided to speak, loud in the small room, and every head turned. "Don't take that bid." Wes was standing now, and his voice was shaking, and he let it shake. "Everybody in this room needs to look. Just look at what we're about to do. There's a woman sitting right there who spent 41 years taking in kids that nobody else on God's earth would take, in that house. The house we're all sitting here waiting to buy for nothing so we can flip it. And his voice, caught. He pushed through it. I was one of those kids. Not hers. I didn't get a her. I got 9 houses, and not one of them wanted me. And I have spent my whole life believing there was no such thing as a house where a kid like me could belong, and I'm sitting in the back of a room about to help sell the one house in this county that proves I was wrong. Nobody moved. Earl Dabney's pen had stopped. Wes turned and looked at the folding chairs, at the other flippers, the men like him. "I know why you're here. I'm here for the same reason. We came to make money. And I'm telling you right now, I'm not bidding on this house. I won't. And I'm asking every single one of you not to bid either. Because I have looked the other way at a lot of these, and so have you, and this is the one. This is the one we don't get to look away from." He pointed, not cruelly, at Dean Pruitt. "That man over there runs Cardinal Home Lending. Look him up on your phones right now. 19 families, 3 counties, always old, always alone, always right after a funeral. That's not a mortgage company. That's a man who hunts grieving widows for a living, and he built a loan that was designed to do this to her. And he is counting on every one of us to be the kind of people who bid anyway. So let's not be. Let's just not be. For once." Today he looked back at Della Hayes, who was staring at him with her hand pressed over her mouth. "Ma'am, I don't know you, but I know your house. I've been looking for your house my whole life." His eyes were streaming now, and he did not care. You are not losing it today, not in a room full of people who are only quiet because they're waiting for somebody else to go first. He looked around one more time. I'll go first. Who's with me? For one long, unbearable second, nothing happened. And then a man in the third row, 38 years old in nurse's scrubs, a man named Reggie Barnes who had come on his lunch break because a cousin had heard a rumor and he'd had a terrible feeling. Reggie Barnes stood up, and he was crying too, and he said, I lived in that house. 1996 to 1999. She's the reason I'm a nurse. He looked at the room. I'm not bidding. Della, why didn't you call me? And then a woman near the door stood up. I lived there too. She took me in when I was 11. And another. Tanya Reese. Poplar Street, 2001. They kept standing, one after another, all through that fluorescent room. The grown children of 214 Poplar Street rose to their feet. A nurse, a mechanic, a school teacher, a man in a delivery uniform, a woman with a baby on her hip, because word had moved through Cutler the way word does. And they had come, not knowing what they could do. And now a stranger in a canvas coat had shown them. 11 of them stood, then more. And every one of them said the same thing, I'm not bidding. Dean Pruitt lowered his phone. For the first time all morning, the man who had trained himself not to see faces was surrounded by nothing but faces. And every one of them was looking at him. It came apart for Dean Pruitt very fast, the way these things do once the first person stands. The other flippers were not going to bid. Not now. Not in front of a room that had turned. Not with their phones already showing them the Cardinal Home Lending search results Wes had sent them to. A speculator can buy a widow's house in silence. He cannot do it in front of 40 witnesses and a newspaper. And there was a newspaper. A young reporter from the Cutler Ledger had come for a routine foreclosure roundup and was now writing as fast as her hand could move. Earl Dabney, the numb auctioneer, looked down at the papers in front of him, and then out at the room, and then at Della Hayes, really looked at her. At a face for the first time in years, and something 22 years dead woke up in Earl Dabney's chest. He set down the pen. I'm going to note for the record, he said slowly, into the silence, in a voice that surprised even him, that there appear to be substantial questions about the underlying loan that this court is going to want to look at before any sale goes forward. I'm continuing this matter. He looked at Pruitt. You'll be hearing from the county about Cardinal. All 19 of them. And then Reggie Barnes, the nurse, did the thing that finished it. He stood up and said, How much does she owe? The real number. Somebody say it out loud. 23,400, Wes said. Reggie took out his phone. There's 40 of us in this room, and 100 more that woman raised. I'll start. I'm putting in 2,000 right now. He held up the phone. Who's next? They covered it in 11 minutes. Standing up, in that basement, on their phones and out of their wallets. Nurses and mechanics and a teacher and a man who drove a delivery truck, the grown children of 214 Poplar Street, covering the debt on the house that raised them, while their foster mother sat in her Sunday coat and shook and wept and said, No, no. You can't. You children can't. And not one of them listened to her. Because for once in 41 years, they were going to be the ones who took care of her. They handed the woman from the lending company a certified promise of the full amount before noon, and under the weight of a room full of witnesses, a reporter, a county about to open an investigation into 19 families worth of fraud, and his own name now searchable on every phone in Cutler. Dean Pruitt took the $23,400, which was all he was ever legally owed, and he walked out of that courthouse with exactly the debt and not 1 inch of the house, and the whole scheme he'd built to steal it dead on the table behind him. Della Hayes kept her home. In the noise afterward, in the hugging and the crying, and the 100 phone calls going out to the children who hadn't heard yet, Wes Turner slipped toward the back door. He had done what he came, what he hadn't come, but ended up to do, and he was a stranger, and strangers don't stay for the family part. Della caught him at the door. She was a small woman, and she took his big contractor's hands in both of hers, and she looked up at him and she said, I don't even know your name." "Wes, ma'am." "Wes," she held his hands tighter. "You said you never got a house. A person like you." Her eyes searched his face. "How old are you?" 44. "That's not too old to belong somewhere." She said it fiercely, like a fact she would fight him over. "You hear me? You stood up in that room, and you belong to every child I ever raised the second you opened your mouth. You've got 140 brothers and sisters now, whether you like it or not. And this house has got a porch, and there is always a seat on it. You come sit on it. That's an order." Wes Turner, 44 years old, who had spent his whole life certain there was no house where a kid like him could belong, stood in a courthouse doorway and could not speak. "I only stood up," he finally managed. "That's all I did. Anybody could have." "But nobody did," Della said. "For 41 years I watched rooms full of people wait for somebody else to go first. You're the one who went first." She patted his hand. "That's not nothing, baby. That's the whole thing. That's the entire ball game." Here is what happened after. Della Hayes still lives at 2114 Poplar Street, free and clear. The loan was not just paid, but voided. In the end, when the county's investigation found exactly what Wes had told the room it would find. Cardinal Home Lending was shut down within the year. Dean Pruitt is facing charges related to all 19 families, and the other 18 are getting their homes back too, one by one, because a young reporter from the Cutler Ledger wrote a story that got picked up everywhere, and the story started with a stranger who stood up in the back row. The children of Poplar Street set up a fund after that morning, a real one, so that Della would never again face anything alone, and so that the house could keep doing what it does. Della, who is 74 and slowing down, doesn't take new placements the way she used to, but the house is still the house. There are graduations on that porch, weddings in the yard. On the last Sunday of every month, as many of the 140 as can make it come home, and the porch cannot hold them, and they spill into the yard and the street, and it is the loudest, fullest house in Cutler County. Reggie Barnes organized the whole thing. He says he'll never forgive Della for not calling him, and he says it while hugging her, every single month. And Wes Turner. Wes went back to 2 towns over, to his crew and his flips. But something changed in the work. He stopped buying at foreclosure auctions, couldn't stomach the rooms anymore. He does something else now. He finds the families 2 weeks before the auction, the ones like Della, and he helps them fight, or refinance honestly, or at least understand what's being done to them. He's not rich. He doesn't make as much. He says he sleeps better than he has since he was 4 years old. He goes to Poplar Street the last Sunday of every month. He sits on the porch. He has a seat. It took him 44 years, but Wes Turner belongs somewhere now, and it is a house full of the same kind of kid he used to be, and he found it by standing up for it before he knew it was his. That's the part I keep coming back to. I've told this story a lot of times, and people always want to talk about the stranger, how brave it was, how he risked looking like a fool, how he stood up alone in a room full of people who wanted him to sit down. But here's the thing I've come to believe, and it's the thing that makes this story different from most of the ones I tell. Wes Turner didn't have anything. That's what gets me. He wasn't secretly rich. He didn't have a checkbook that could stop the sale, or a title or power, or a connection to that family, or a single card up his sleeve. He was a nobody in a canvas coat, with less money than half the people in the room. He had exactly one thing, and it's the one thing every person hearing this has too. He was willing to be first. Because here's what that morning taught me, and I think it's truer than almost anything. The reason bad things happen in rooms full of decent people is almost never that the people approve. Look at that room. 40 people, and 39 of them already knew it was wrong. They didn't need to be convinced. They weren't bad, they were just waiting, the way we are all, always waiting, for somebody else to go first. For permission. For the cost of standing up to be paid by someone braver, so the rest of us could safely follow. Evil almost never wins because it's stronger than good. It wins because good is sitting in folding chairs, waiting to be second. The whole thing, the house, the widow, the 140 children, all of it, turned on one ordinary person with nothing to his name deciding to absorb the cost of being first, so that everyone else could finally do the thing they already wanted to do. You don't have to be rich to stop something wrong. You don't have to be powerful. You have to be willing to be the first one on your feet in a quiet room while everyone waits to see if standing up gets you laughed at. That's the price. That's the whole price. And almost nobody wants to pay it, which is exactly why it's worth so much when somebody does. So here's what I'll leave you with. The next time you're in that room, and you will be, we all are, sooner or later, some room where the wrong thing is quietly happening and everyone's waiting, I hope you remember Wes Turner. Nobody. Canvas coat. Nothing in his pockets. First one up. You can be that. Every one of you can be that. It's the one kind of hero that doesn't require anything but nerve. Go first. This story is a work of fiction. Della and Otis Hayes, Wes Turner, Dean Pruitt, Earl Dabney, Reggie Barnes, Cardinal Home Lending, the town of Cutler, and every place and event in it were created for this narration. Any resemblance to real people, companies, or events is coincidental. If you ever had a Della, someone who took you in, or stood up for you, or gave you a place to belong when you thought there wasn't one, tell me about them in the comments. Say their name. Those are the people this whole channel is really about. And if you've ever been the one who stood up first in a room full of people waiting to be second, or wished you had, tell me that too. We could all use the reminder that it's possible. If you want more stories told this way, slowly, and with respect for everyone in them, subscribe, and I'll have the next one ready for you. Take care of each other. I'll see you in the next one.